The morning started like any other day in the small fishing village of San Roque. Maria woke up before sunrise, just as she had done every day for the past 5 years since her husband passed away. The smell of salt water mixed with the fresh, morning air as she stepped outside their simple bamboo house. She could hear the waves gently touching the shore, a sound that used to bring her comfort, but now reminded her of the ocean that took her husband away. Maria was 52 years old, with gentle brown eyes and hands that showed years of hard work. Her 3 daughters were still sleeping inside. Elena, the oldest at 24, had stayed up late again studying for her teaching exam by candlelight. Sophia, 22, was dreaming about the tourist guide job she hoped to get at the new resort. Carmen, the youngest at 20, had fallen, asleep while working on her beautiful woven bags that she sold at the market. The radio crackled with morning news, but something was different today. The weatherman was talking about a big storm coming their way. Typhoon Rosario was moving toward their coast, and it was getting stronger. Maria felt a chill run down her back. She had lived through many storms, but something about this one felt different. By noon, the wind started picking up. The palm trees that usually swayed gently were now bending like they were bowing to some invisible king. Maria called her daughters. Together, they needed to prepare. They moved their few valuable things to higher shelves, stored extra water in old bottles, and made sure they had enough rice and dried fish to last a few days. Elena helped her mother tie down anything that could fly away in the wind. Sophia checked on their elderly neighbor Mrs. Santos, who lived alone next door. Carmen gathered all the candles and matches she could find, knowing they would lose electricity soon. As the afternoon went on, the sky turned dark gray, almost black. The wind was now howling like a wild animal. Rain started falling, first in big drops, then in sheets so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The radio kept warning people to stay inside and move to higher ground if they lived near water. Their little house sat close to the shore, maybe 200 meters from the water. It had been safe for many years, but today the ocean looked angry. Waves were crashing harder and higher than Maria had ever seen. The water was a dark, frightening color, nothing like the clear blue she was used to. By evening, things got really bad. The electricity went out, just as Carmen had expected. They lit candles and huddled together in the main room of their house. The wind was so loud they had to shout to hear each other. Rain was coming through small gaps in their bamboo walls, creating puddles on their wooden floor. Then they heard it. A sound that made Maria's heart stop. It was the sound of rushing water, but not rain. It was the ocean coming to visit them whether they wanted it or not. Elena looked out the window and gasped. Water was flowing down their street like a river. The flood came fast. Within an hour, water was ankle-deep in their house. Within 2 hours, it was up to their knees. The current was strong, carrying pieces of wood, plastic chairs, and things from other people's homes. Their furniture started floating around their own living room like boats in a strange indoor lake. Maria knew they had to get out, but where could they go? The water outside was moving too fast and too deep to walk through. Their neighbors' houses were flooding too. Some families had already climbed onto their roofs. Elena, being the tallest and strongest, went first. She pushed open their back door, against the rushing water, and climbed up onto their roof using an old wooden ladder. Then she helped pull Sophia up, then Carmen, and finally their mother. The 4 women sat on their slippery roof in the dark, holding on to each other and shivering in the cold rain. From up there, they could see the whole village. It looked like a lake with houses sticking out of it. Some roofs had other families on them too, all waiting and hoping for help to come. But the water kept getting higher, and their roof didn't seem high enough anymore. The hours passed slowly. The wind was still strong, making it hard to stay balanced on the wet roof. They could hear people calling for help from other houses, but there was nothing they could do. No boats could move through all the floating debris. The rescue teams were probably dealing with emergencies in the bigger towns first. Maria held her daughters close and prayed. She thought about her husband and wondered if this was how his story ended too, surrounded by angry water with no way out. But she couldn't give up. Her daughters needed her to be strong. As the night went on, They could see lights in the distance. Maybe it was the rescue team. Maybe it was just someone else with a flashlight. The water around their house was now almost touching the bottom edge of their roof. If it rose much more, they would have nowhere left to go. That's when they saw him. A small boat with a bright light was moving slowly through the flooded streets. Someone was actually out there in this dangerous water, looking for people who needed help. The boat came closer, and they could see it was just one person, wearing some kind of special gear. The man in the boat was having a hard time. The current kept pushing him around, and he had to avoid floating trees and pieces of metal roofing. But he didn't give up. He saw their family on the roof and pointed his light toward them. Even through the rain and wind, they could see him, waving. Getting to them wasn't easy. The water around their house was full of dangerous things floating by. Twice, the man had to push away big pieces of wood that could have damaged his small boat. But he kept trying, getting a little closer each time. Finally, he managed to get close enough to shout over the storm. He had an accent they didn't recognize, but his message was clear. He was there to help them get to safety. One by one, he would take them to higher ground where other people were gathering. The rescue took almost 2 hours. The man could only take one person at a time in his small boat because the water was so rough. Elena went first, then Sophia, then Carmen. Maria went last, not wanting to leave until she knew all her daughters were safe. When it was finally Maria's turn, she looked into the face of the man who had saved her family. He was young, maybe close to Elena's age, with kind eyes and a gentle smile even though he was clearly exhausted. She didn't know his name or where he came from, but she knew one thing for certain. This stranger had risked his own life to save theirs when no one else could reach them. As they reached the evacuation center, Maria's heart was full of gratitude. Her family was alive and together. They had lost their house and most of their belongings, but they still had each other, and they had this mysterious young man to thank for it. She made a promise to herself that night as she watched her daughters sleep safely on cots in the school building that had become their temporary home. Somehow, someday she would find a way to repay this debt of gratitude. She didn't know how yet, but a mother's promise is a powerful thing. The next morning at the evacuation center, Maria woke up to the sound of her daughters whispering excitedly. They were talking about the young man who had saved them. In the chaos of the night before, none of them had even learned his name. Elena was wondering if he was okay. Sophia was curious about where he came from, and Carmen wanted to thank him properly. David Chen walked into the school gymnasium carrying boxes of relief supplies. He had barely slept, spending the night helping coordinate rescue efforts with the local authorities. When he saw Maria's family sitting together on their cots, sharing a small breakfast of crackers and canned sardines, his face lit up with a tired but genuine smile. "Good morning," he said in careful, slow English. "How are you feeling today?" Maria stood up immediately and bowed slightly, a gesture of deep respect. "We are alive because of you," she said in her broken English, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much." David looked embarrassed by the attention. "Please, it's okay, I'm just happy you're all safe. My name is David, by the way. I should have introduced myself last night, but everything was so crazy." Elena stepped forward. She had studied English in school and was the best speaker among her sisters. "I am Elena, and these are my sisters Sophia and Carmen. This is our mother, Maria. We don't know how to thank you enough." Over the next few days, David kept coming back to check on them. He brought food, clean water, and updates about when they might be able to return to their village. But more than that, he brought hope and friendship during one of the darkest times in their lives. David told them he was a marine biologist from Canada, studying coral reefs and ocean life. He had come to the Philippines for research, but the typhoon had interrupted his work. Instead of leaving when things got dangerous, he had stayed to help with rescue and recovery efforts. "Why did you stay?" Sophia asked him one afternoon as they sat outside the evacuation center. "Weren't you scared?" David thought for a moment. "Of course I was scared. but I couldn't just leave when people needed help. Besides, I've learned so much from being here. Your country, your people. There's so much strength and kindness here. As the days passed, something beautiful began to happen. David started spending more and more time with the family, not just as their rescuer, but as a friend. He would sit with them during meals, help the children at the evacuation center with their homework, and listen to Maria's stories about life in their village. Elena was amazed by David's passion for protecting the ocean. He showed her pictures on his waterproof camera of colorful coral reefs and explained how pollution and warming waters were threatening marine life. "I want to teach people about taking care of our environment," Elena told him. "Maybe we could work together someday." Sophia loved practicing English with David. He was patient and encouraging, never making fun of her mistakes. In return, she taught him basic words in Tagalog. Salamat for thank you, kumusta for how are you, and pamilya for family. Soon David was greeting everyone at the evacuation center in their local language, making people smile despite their difficult situation. Carmen, though the youngest, impressed David the most with her artistic talent and business mind. She had managed to save some of her woven bags from the flood, and David was fascinated by the intricate patterns and bright colors. "These are incredible," he told her. "In Canada, people would pay a lot of money for handmade art like this." Carmen's eyes sparkled with possibility. "Really? Maybe I could sell them to tourists someday. I have so many ideas for new designs." Maria watched these conversations with growing amazement. This young man wasn't just being polite or feeling sorry for them. He genuinely cared about her daughter's dreams and futures. He listened to them like their opinions mattered, treated them with respect, and encouraged their ambitions. When the water finally receded enough for them to return to their village, the destruction was heartbreaking. Their little bamboo house was completely gone, swept away by the flood. Only the concrete foundation remained, along with a few scattered belongings stuck in the mud. Maria sat on a broken piece of wood and cried. 5 years of rebuilding their lives after her husband's death, and now they had to start all over again. David found her there and sat down beside her without saying anything. Sometimes silence is the best comfort. After a while, he spoke quietly. "I know this looks impossible right now, but you're not alone. I want to help you rebuild." "You have already done so much," Maria replied, wiping her tears. "You saved our lives. That is enough." "No," David said firmly. "Saving your lives was just the beginning. Now I want to help you build a better life." And that's exactly what happened. David extended his research visa and threw himself into helping the community rebuild, but he spent most of his time working with Maria's family. Together, they designed a new house that would be stronger and safer than the old one. David taught them about building techniques that could better resist flooding, while they taught him traditional construction methods using local materials. Every morning, David would arrive at their temporary shelter with tools, supplies, and a thermos of hot coffee that he had somehow managed to find in the nearest town. Elena would help plan the layout of their new home. Sophia would translate between David and the local workers they hired. Carmen would organize supplies and keep track of expenses with the careful attention of a natural accountant. But the real magic happened in the evenings. After long days of construction work, they would sit together and share stories. David told them about his life in Canada, about snowy winters and maple syrup, about his family who worried about him traveling so far from home. The sisters shared their dreams and hopes, their memories of their father, and their plans for the future. Maria noticed how her daughters' faces would light up whenever David arrived. She saw how carefully he listened to each of them, how he remembered small details about their interests and goals. Elena would blush when David praised her teaching ideas. Sophia would laugh more freely when practicing English with him. Carmen would beam with pride when David admired her latest craft project. More importantly, Maria saw how David looked at her daughters, not with the casual interest of a young man passing through their lives, but with genuine affection and respect. He treated Elena like an intellectual equal, discussing environmental issues and education reform. He encouraged Sophia's language skills and cultural curiosity. He took Carmen's business ideas seriously and offered practical advice. As their new house began to take shape, so did something else. Bonds of friendship and affection that went deeper than gratitude. David had become more than their rescuer. He had become part of their family. 3 months after the typhoon, as they prepared to move into their beautiful new home, Maria realized something that both surprised and concerned her. David's visa would expire soon and he would have to return to Canada. The thought of him leaving felt like another kind of storm approaching, one that might break her daughter's hearts. That night, as she listened to her daughters talking quietly about David in the next room, Maria began to form an idea. It was bold, unusual, and would require all of her courage to suggest. But sometimes, she thought, the most extraordinary situations call for extraordinary solutions. The calendar on their kitchen wall showed March 15, 2020. David had been with them for almost 6 months now, but his research visa would expire in just 2 weeks. Everyone knew this day was coming, but nobody wanted to talk about it. The house felt different lately, like a shadow was hanging over their happiness. Elena had been quieter than usual, spending more time looking out at the ocean. Sophia stopped asking David to teach her new English words. Carmen worked on her crafts with less enthusiasm, her usual bright chatter replaced by thoughtful silence. Even David seemed distracted, often staring at nothing and sighing deeply. Maria watched all of this with a heavy heart. She had seen this kind of sadness before when young people in their village had to say goodbye to someone they loved. But this was different. This wasn't just one person facing heartbreak. This was her whole family about to lose someone who had become essential to their happiness. One evening, Maria made a decision. She asked David to stay for dinner on his last weekend in the Philippines. "We want to cook something special for you," she told him. "A proper farewell dinner." David tried to smile, but Maria could see the sadness in his eyes. "I would love that. But Maria, this isn't really goodbye. I'll find a way to come back and visit. Maybe next year or—" "We will see," Maria said gently. But they both knew how difficult and expensive such trips would be for a young researcher. That Saturday, the whole family worked together to prepare a feast. They cooked David's favorite Filipino dishes: chicken, adobo, pancit noodles, fresh spring rolls, and coconut rice. Carmen picked flowers from their garden to decorate the table. Sophia practiced a little speech in English that she wanted to give. Elena helped her mother prepare a special dessert. As the sun set over the water, they all sat down together for what everyone believed would be their last family dinner. The food was delicious, but nobody seemed very hungry. They shared stories and memories from the past months, laughing at funny moments and growing quiet during the emotional ones. David told them again how much their friendship meant to him. "You saved my life too, you know," he said. "Not from a typhoon, but from loneliness. You taught me what real family feels like." Elena wiped away a tear. "You gave us hope when we had lost everything." Sophia nodded. "And you believed in our dreams when nobody else did." Carmen, who rarely cried, was openly weeping. "I don't want you to go." Maria had been quiet through most of the dinner, but now she stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking slightly as she walked to the head of the table. Her daughters looked at her with surprise. Their mother rarely made formal speeches. "David," Maria began, her voice stronger than she felt inside. "6 months ago you saved our lives, but you did much more than that. You saved our hearts, our hopes, our future." David started to say something, but Maria raised her hand gently. "Please let me finish. I am an old woman and I have learned some things about life. I have watched you with my daughters these past months. I have seen how you look at them, how you care for them, how you respect them." The room was completely silent now. Even the evening birds seemed to have stopped singing. "In our culture," Maria continued, "when someone saves your life, they become responsible for it, and you become responsible for theirs. You are not just our friend, David. You are family, but tomorrow you will leave, and my daughters' hearts will break. I cannot Let this happen. Elena, Sophia, and Carmen exchanged confused glances. Where was their mother going with this? Maria took a deep breath. What she was about to say would change everything. I want to make you an offer, David. I want to give you the greatest gift a mother can give. I want to offer you my daughter's hands in marriage. The silence that followed was so complete that Maria could hear her own heartbeat. David's fork clattered to his plate. Elena gasped. Sophia's mouth fell open. Carmen stared at her mother like she had never seen her before. Mama? Elena whispered. Maria's voice grew stronger as she continued. I have watched you three girls fall in love with this good man. And I have watched him fall in love with all of you, each in your own special way. Elena, you share his love of learning and teaching. Sophia, you make him laugh and help him understand our culture. Carmen, you inspire him with your creativity and determination. David finally found his voice. Maria, I don't know what to say. This is incredible, but I can't. In my culture, we don't. I know, Maria said softly. This is not normal for your people, but David, look at my daughters, really look at them. Tell me honestly, do you love them? David looked at Elena, with her intelligent eyes and passion for making the world better. He looked at Sophia, whose laughter had brought joy to his darkest days. He looked at Carmen, whose artistic spirit and wise heart had amazed him from the beginning. Yes, he said quietly. I love them all. But Maria, how can this work? I live in Canada. The laws are different there. People would think this is strange, maybe even wrong. Elena finally spoke up. Mama, are you serious about this? You want all three of us to marry David? Maria sat back down and took her daughter's hands. My dear girls, I am not forcing anything. If any of you says no, then we forget this conversation. But I see how happy you are with David. I see how he treats you with respect and kindness. In the old days, parents arranged marriages based on character and compatibility, not just romance. Sophia was crying now, but they were different tears than before. I have been in love with David for months, but I thought it was hopeless. He's so educated, so worldly. Why would he choose someone like me? Carmen nodded. Me too. I wake up every morning excited to see him, and I go to sleep thinking about our conversations. Elena looked the most conflicted. But how would this work practically? David, you could marry one of us legally, but not all three. And what about your family? Your career? David was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he spoke. My family raised me to follow my heart and treat people with respect. They also taught me that love comes in many forms. I never imagined a situation like this, but he paused, looking at each sister. But I can't imagine my life without any of you. Maria smiled for the first time that evening. Then we find a way to make it work. Love always finds a way. The conversation that followed lasted until dawn. They talked about practical matters, legal issues, cultural differences, and what their friends and neighbors might think. But mostly they talked about love, commitment, and what it means to be a family. By the time the sun rose over the ocean, everything had changed. David's departure was postponed while they figured out this new path forward. The three sisters had admitted their feelings to each other and to David. And Maria had made the most unconventional proposal in her village's history. Not everyone would understand it. Some people would criticize or judge them. But Maria had learned something important during that terrible typhoon night. When life gives you an impossible situation, sometimes you need an impossible solution. She looked at her daughters and David, sitting together as the morning light filled their kitchen, and she knew she had made the right choice. Love, after all, is the most powerful force in the world, and sometimes it takes the most unexpected forms. David's flight back to Canada was the longest 8 hours of his life. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see Maria's hopeful face and her three daughters looking at him with a mixture of love and uncertainty. The airplane felt like it was carrying him away from his heart, leaving pieces of it scattered across the Pacific Ocean. When he finally arrived in Vancouver, his family was waiting at the airport. His parents, Robert and Linda, had been worried about him during the typhoon. Months ago, his younger sister Jessica had been sending him care packages filled with Canadian chocolate and warm socks. They all expected him to be happy about coming home. But one look at David's face told them something was very different. "You look like someone who left half of himself behind," his mother said gently, as they drove through the familiar streets of his hometown. The cherry blossoms were blooming, painting the city pink and white. But David barely noticed the beauty around him. That evening, sitting in his childhood bedroom surrounded by science books and old research papers, David tried to explain everything to his family. He told them about the typhoon, about rescuing Maria and her daughters, about the months of rebuilding and growing friendship. Finally, he took a deep breath and told them about Maria's proposal. The silence that followed reminded him of that moment at the dinner table in the Philippines. His father cleared his throat several times. His mother stared at him with wide eyes. Jessica, who was usually full of questions and opinions, didn't say a word. "So let me understand this correctly," his father finally said. "This woman wants you to marry all three of her daughters?" "It's not as simple as that, Dad," David replied. "It's about gratitude, love, and taking care of each other. Maria sees marriage as a way to make sure her daughters are protected and happy. And honestly, I can't imagine my life without any of them." His mother leaned forward. "Tell us about them, David. What are they like?" For the next 2 hours, David talked about Elena's passion for teaching and environmental protection, Sophia's gift for languages and cultural understanding, and Carmen's artistic talents and business sense. As he spoke, his eyes lit up in a way his family had never seen before. "You really love them," Jessica said softly. "All three of them." "I do," David admitted. "But I don't know how to make this work. In Canada, I can only legally marry one person. And even if I could figure out the legal stuff, what would people think? What about my career? What about bringing them here?" Over the following weeks, David threw himself into research, but not the kind involving coral reefs and marine life. He spent hours reading about immigration law, cultural marriage practices, and family sponsorship programs. He video called Elena, Sophia, and Carmen every day, sometimes talking to all three together, sometimes speaking with each one privately. During these conversations, David learned more about their individual personalities and dreams. Elena wanted to get her master's degree in education and work on environmental programs in schools. Sophia dreamed of starting a cultural exchange program to help Filipino families adapt to life in other countries. Carmen had big plans for expanding her craft business and maybe opening a gallery showcasing Southeast Asian art. David's family gradually warmed up to the idea as they got to know the sisters through video calls. Linda was impressed by Elena's intelligence and dedication to helping others. Robert appreciated Sophia's curiosity about Canadian culture and her respectful questions about their family traditions. Jessica became fast friends with Carmen, bonding over their shared love of art and creative projects. "They're wonderful girls," Linda told David one evening after a particularly long video call. "I can see why you fell in love with all of them. But son, how do you plan to make this work practically?" David had been thinking about this constantly. After consulting with immigration lawyers and cultural advisors, he came up with a plan that was unusual but legal. "I can marry Elena officially in Canada," he explained. "She's the oldest, and we share the strongest romantic connection. But I can also enter into traditional Filipino commitment ceremonies with Sophia and Carmen. These ceremonies would be recognized in their culture, even if they're not legally binding here." The immigration lawyer had explained that David could sponsor all three sisters as family members under Canada's Humanitarian and Compassionate Grounds program. Their unique situation, combined with David's stable income and housing, made them eligible for special consideration. But the biggest challenge wasn't legal. It was emotional and cultural. David needed to make sure this arrangement would truly make everyone happy, not just solve a practical problem. During one video call, he had a heart-to-heart conversation with each sister individually. Elena told him she had always known she would share his love with her sisters, and that didn't diminish her feelings for him. "In our culture, family comes first," she said. "If marrying you means my sisters are also taken care of, then I'm even happier." Sophia was more concerned about fitting into Canadian society. "Will people accept us?" she asked. "Will they understand that this isn't about one man collecting wives, but about a family staying together?" Carmen, always the practical one, had questions about how they would manage day-to-day life. Where will we all live? How will we handle money? What if we want to have children someday? These were all valid concerns, and David addressed each one carefully. He found a large house in a diverse neighborhood where many immigrant families lived. He opened separate bank accounts for each sister, ensuring their financial independence. Most importantly, he promised that any major decisions would be made together as a family. David's employer, a Marine Research Institute, was surprisingly supportive when he explained the situation. "We've had researchers with unconventional families before," his supervisor said. "What matters is your work quality and your happiness. If this arrangement makes you happy and doesn't interfere with your research, we support you." The hardest part was dealing with criticism from people who didn't understand. Some of David's old friends made jokes about his harem, completely missing the point about love, respect, and cultural differences. A few family members expressed concern about what the neighbors would think. But David had learned something important during his time in the Philippines. What matters most is not what strangers think, but how you treat the people you love. Maria had shown incredible courage in making her proposal. Now it was his turn to be brave. 6 months after returning to Canada, David flew back to the Philippines with a ring for Elena and traditional gifts for Sophia and Carmen. He had also brought legal papers that would allow all 3 sisters to immigrate to Canada as his family. The night before the ceremonies, David sat with Maria on the beach where he had first rescued her family. The water was calm now, reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds. "Are you sure about this?" Maria asked him. "Once you marry my daughters, you become responsible for their happiness for the rest of your life." David looked out at the peaceful ocean, so different from the angry waters of that typhoon night. "Maria, when I pulled your family from that flood, I thought I was just saving 4 lives. I didn't know I was also saving my own life. Your daughters taught me what it means to love completely and honestly. I'm not just sure about this, I'm grateful for it." Maria smiled and patted his hand. "Then tomorrow we make our families official. And David?" "Yes?" "Thank you for having the courage to love differently. The world needs more people like you." As they walked back toward the house where Elena, Sophia, and Carmen were excitedly preparing for their wedding ceremonies, David felt a deep sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. Love, he had learned, doesn't always follow the rules that society makes. Sometimes it creates its own beautiful, complicated, perfect path. December 20th, 2020 dawned bright and clear in the little village of San Roque. The typhoon that had brought destruction almost 2 years ago seemed like a distant memory. Today, the same beach where David had rescued Maria's family would witness something the village had never seen before. 3 wedding ceremonies in one day. The whole community had been talking about this event for weeks. Some people thought it was wonderful, others were confused, and a few disapproved. But Maria didn't care about the gossip. She had seen her daughters transform from heartbroken flood victims into confident, hopeful young women. Today was about celebrating love in all its beautiful, complicated forms. Elena woke up first, as she always did, but instead of her usual work clothes, today she would wear her grandmother's white wedding dress, carefully altered to fit her perfectly. The dress had been saved from the flood in an old trunk, one of the few precious things that survived. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Elena could almost feel her grandmother's blessing. Sophia spent the morning helping the village ladies prepare traditional Filipino wedding foods. Lechon was roasting over an open fire, pancit noodles were being stirred in giant pots, and the sweet smell of bibingka rice cakes filled the air. Sophia's job was to make sure the Canadian guests felt welcomed and included. David's family had arrived 3 days earlier, and despite the language barrier, they were already being treated like long-lost relatives. Carmen was in her element, decorating the beach venue with flowers and colorful fabrics. She had designed 3 different ceremony areas, each reflecting the personality of the bride who would use it. Elena's area featured white flowers and educational books as decorations, symbolizing her love of teaching. Sophia's space was decorated with flags from different countries, representing her passion for cultural exchange. Carmen's own area showcased her hand-woven crafts and painted artwork. David spent the morning in quiet reflection, walking along the shore where everything had begun. He thought about the scared young man who had jumped into a small boat during a typhoon, never imagining it would lead to this moment. Today he would make promises to 3 incredible women, and he felt the weight and joy of that responsibility. The first ceremony began at sunset, when the sky turned golden orange over the water. Elena and David exchanged vows in both English and Tagalog, with a local priest blessing their legal marriage. Elena promised to support David's environmental work while pursuing her own dreams of education reform. David promised to love and respect not just Elena but her entire family, including the sisters who would soon become his wives in all but legal terms. Elena's voice was steady as she spoke her vows. "David, you saved my life in that flood, but you saved my heart by believing in my dreams. I promise to be your partner in making the world a better place and to share you generously with the sisters I love." The second ceremony took place an hour later, under strings of twinkling lights that Carmen had hung between the palm trees. Sophia and David exchanged traditional Filipino wedding rings while a cultural elder performed ancient blessing rituals. Sophia had written her vows in both languages, switching between English and Tagalog in a way that made everyone smile. "David, you taught me that love has no borders," Sophia said, her voice clear and confident. "I promise to help you understand our culture while learning about yours. Together we will build bridges between different worlds." The third ceremony was the most artistic, taking place around a bonfire that cast dancing shadows on the sand. Carmen and David exchanged handmade rings that she had crafted herself, embedded with small stones from the beach where they first met. Their ceremony included music, dancing, and the sharing of traditional Filipino and Canadian foods. Carmen's vows were simple but powerful. "David, you see beauty in things that others overlook. You saw beauty in our broken family and helped us rebuild it stronger. I promise to create a life with you that is as colorful and unique as the art we both love." After all 3 ceremonies, the entire village joined in a celebration that lasted until dawn. David's parents, who had been nervous about this unconventional arrangement, found themselves dancing with elderly Filipino grandmothers and sharing stories with local fishermen. His sister Jessica spent the evening learning traditional Filipino dances from Carmen, laughing until her sides hurt. Maria watched everything with tears of joy streaming down her face. 2 years ago, she had been a desperate widow clinging to a roof in a flood. Tonight she was the mother of 3 happily married daughters and the mother-in-law of a young man who had become like a son to her. The move to Canada 6 months later was both exciting and terrifying for the sisters. The airplane ride was Elena's first time flying, Sophia's first time leaving the Philippines, and Carmen's first sight of snow. David had prepared their new home carefully, making sure each sister had her own space while creating common areas where they could all spend time together. Elena enrolled in a master's program in environmental education at the University of British Columbia. Her professors were impressed by her unique perspective on conservation issues, especially her ideas about teaching environmental protection to rural communities. Within a year, she was working part-time for an organization that developed educational programs for developing countries. Sophia started her cultural exchange business from their living room, helping Filipino families navigate Canadian immigration and settlement. Her natural gift for languages and cultural sensitivity made her incredibly successful. Soon she was working with families from other countries too, becoming known throughout Vancouver as the person who could help anyone feel at home. In Canada, Carmen's art business flourished beyond her wildest dreams. Canadian customers fell in love with her traditional Filipino crafts, but she also began creating fusion pieces that combined Filipino techniques with Canadian materials. Her work was featured in galleries, and she even got a contract to create custom pieces for a luxury hotel chain. The challenges were real, though. Some neighbors were curious about their unusual family arrangement. Though most were polite about it, the sisters had to learn to navigate Canadian winters, bureaucracy, and cultural differences. There were moments of homesickness, especially during Filipino holidays when they missed their extended family, but the joys far outweighed the difficulties. David's research career thrived, partly because his unique family situation gave him insights into cultural adaptation and resilience. The sisters supported each other through every challenge, just as they had during the typhoon. And slowly, their neighbors came to see them not as an odd arrangement, but as a loving family who contributed positively to their community. By 2023, their house was filled with the sounds of children's laughter. Elena and David had welcomed baby Michael, who learned to say mama in 3 languages. Sophia gave birth to twins, Anna and James, who inherited their mother's gift for communication. Carmen's daughter, Little Rose, showed early signs of artistic talent, often found drawing on every surface she could reach. Maria, now a proud grandmother, had moved to Canada to help care for the growing family. She became a beloved figure in their neighborhood, teaching other immigrant women how to grow tropical vegetables in Canadian soil, and sharing her story of survival and hope with anyone who would listen. The house that had once seemed impossibly large now felt perfectly sized for their extended family. David would often sit in their backyard in the evenings watching his wives play with their children, while Maria told stories in the fading light. Sometimes he could hardly believe this was his life. On the 5th anniversary of their weddings, the family returned to the Philippines to visit the rebuilt village of San Roque. The beach where David had rescued them was now peaceful and beautiful again. The community they had left behind was thriving, partly thanks to the money the sisters sent home and the sustainable development projects David had helped establish. As they stood together on that beach, watching their children play in the same sand where their love story began, David reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them here. A typhoon that could have destroyed everything had instead created something beautiful and unprecedented. Their story had become legend in both the Philippines and Canada. People would talk about the young man who saved a family from a flood and ended up gaining a family himself. Some called it crazy, others called it inspiring. David and his wives simply called it love.